When we talk about the former Soviet Union, it seems that we are talking about a dystopia, and when we talk about the rulers, we will easily find among the ranks several of the most terrible tyrants in history. And today, we will not talk about one of these tyrants. Today, we will talk about a ruler that history is still debating whether he is a hero or a villain. We will talk about Mikhail GORBATCHEV. Mikhail Sergeyevich GORBATCHEV was born in Privolnoye, Stavropol in 1931. His father, Sergeyevich Andreyevich GORBATCHEV, was a World War II veteran who worked with continuous harvesters. His mother, Maria Pantelevna Gobkalo, worked on a collective farm. He was raised mainly by his maternal grandparents. His family was of Russian-Ukrainian origin, being made up of immigrants from Voronezh and Zherginov. As a child, he experienced the Soviet famine of 1932-1933. Nearly half of the population of his native village, Privolnoye, died of starvation, including 3 of his uncles. Both his grandfathers were arrested and trumped up. Changes in the 1930s. His paternal grandfather, Andrei Moiseyevich GORBATCHEV, was sent into exile in Siberia. At the age of 15, Mikhail GORBATCHEV studied while working at a tractor station. He studied law at Moscow State University. He completed his education with agronomy studies in the 1960s, which allowed him to obtain his first great political success when he faced the catastrophic drought of 1968. It was then that he jumped into national politics, being elected member of the Supreme Soviet in 1970, of the Central Committee of the party in 1971, as Secretary of Agriculture in 1978 and of the Politburo in 1980. This rapid rise culminated in his election as General Secretary of the Communist Party of the USSR after the death of Konstantin Chernenko in 1985 by a narrow margin of votes. With this, he gained the ultimate power of the declining Soviet power, which would be completed by his appointment as chairman of the Supreme Soviet and head of state in 1988. This program, however, was the work of a convinced communist, eager to strengthen and perfect the socialist regime through transparency, glasnost, and restructuring perestroika. Glasnost came first and most easily. Gorbachev introduced greater information transparency, ended repression of dissidents, dismantled the police state and press censorship, restored some freedom of speech, and publicly acknowledged the crimes and mistakes committed in the past by the party and the Soviet state. With all this, he won the support of Western governments and public opinion. This welcome is not surprising, given that Gorbachev practiced a pacifist foreign policy, leading the USSR to renounce its role as a great world power, in order to reduce the heavy military expenditures that the country's weakened economy could hardly bear. He negotiated a disarmament treaty with then US President Ronald Reagan in 1987. He also decided to withdraw Russian troops from Afghanistan in 1989. The latter decision did not exactly bring peace, as the withdrawal of the Soviet army led to more or less revolutionary processes that put an end to the communist regimes in Central and Eastern Europe, which finally paved the way of the reunification of Germany in 1980. Economic reconstruction, however, was to be one of the Gorbachev's main failures. Perestroika was supposed to bring the Soviet economy out of the chaos and stagnation in which it was mired, introducing greater freedom of enterprise and allowing the market to act to correct the shortcomings of planning. However, these reforms did not have immediate positive results, as they further disorganized the existing productive system and deepened the impoverishment of the majority of the population. All this created social tensions, aggravated by the political and economic interests that were affected. On the political side, an opening was initiated which was to lead gradually to a multi-party democracy, but the progress along this path, considered excessive by the communist old guard, was considered too slow by the growing opposition outside the party. Gorbachev and his team advanced slowly due to the existing resistance within the regime and the fear of losing control of the process. The main effect of the opening was the emergence of nationalist sentiments which resulted in independence movements in the various republics that made up the USSR. In 1985, the USSR government declared a moratorium on nuclear weapons testing. On January 15, 1986, the declaration of the Soviet government was published with a program of complete nuclear disarmament, to be completed by the year 2000, which also contained an appeal to the countries of the world to support the moratorium and to reduction of the use of nuclear weapons. With Gorbachev in power, the USSR proclaimed that there would be no interference in the internal affairs of other states, including the Warsaw Pact countries. The Soviet Union's decision to end its policy with these states led to a change of power in most of the socialist countries. As a consequence, in June 1989, Hungary removed the fence on its borders with its western neighbor, Austria. On September 11, 1989, the border was declared open. Citizens of the German Democratic Republic began to emigrate through Hungary to Western European countries in the hope of, from there, being able to enter the Federal Republic of Germany. Between September 11th and 14th, 1989, 50,000 citizens of the GDR left the country. The GDR authorities lost control of the situation and the Berlin Wall lost its significance. On November 9, 1989, the GDR authorities declared that their citizens could obtain visas to visit West Berlin and the Federal Republic of Germany. Hundreds of thousands of East Germans, tired of waiting for the necessary documentation, spontaneously headed for the border. At first, border troops tried to stem the human tide, but eventually opened the border. West Berlin residents, for their part, left to join their neighbors, who for decades had been forced to live in another country. Mikhail Gorbachev's foreign policy was a key piece that prevented the bloodshed and the decisive factor in the fall of the wall and the reunification of Germany. On October 16, 1990, Mikhail Gorbachev was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for promoting reforms in Eastern Europe and helping to end the Cold War. The Norwegian Committee noted his important role in bringing about positive changes in the relationship between East and West. Mikhail Gorbachev transfers the financial endowment he won with the Nobel Prize for the state budget. The money was used to build hospitals in the country. In 1991, there was an attempted military coup d'etat with an involutionist tendency, which was stopped by the strength of the radical democratic movement, led by Boris Yeltsin, who took power in Russia, pushing Gorbachev aside and making a pact with the leaders of the other republics to dismantle the USSR. Gorbachev retired from politics that same year, although he went for the Russian presidential elections in 1996. He obtained a dismal result, reflecting the unpopularity he earned in his own country. He was critical of the policies of Boris Yeltsin's government. He favored slower economic reform and the creation of a new confederated union to replace the Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS. In September 1992, he refused to appear before Russia's Constitutional Court to discuss the ban on the Communist Party of the Soviet Union imposed by President Boris Yeltsin. The government banned him from traveling abroad if he did not appear before the court, but his ban was lifted after provoking a widespread international outcry. In June 1992, he was officially expelled from the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, accused of having contributed to its downfall. He left for the United States and Japan, where he gave several lectures and worked on a book about the demise of the Soviet Union. In March 1986, he went for president for the Russian Federation, but with almost no support. In Western circles and even on the street, he was a respected, liked and even popular man. In 2008, his return to politics was with the Independent Democratic Party of Russia. Gorbachev has both supporters and detractors. The former consider him a legendary reformer who brought freedom and democracy to a closed country and created the concept of glasnost and perestroika. For the latter, he is simply someone who brought an end to a superpower. The truth is that Gorbachev contributed to the transformation of the entire international political landscape. He is credited with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. Thanks for watching this video and follow me every day on my reels.